WNST will be a almost full-time discussion around here at WNST.net this week, next week, every week, up to the trading deadline, July 30th. We're going to be running a bus out for Ray Lewis and for Canton and the Pro Football Hall of Fame that weekend. The Ravens will be probably in about week 1.5 of training camp at that time, but between now and then, many things are going to be happening. And there's not a whole lot of rumors. There's not a lot of speculation. They're so horrifically awful this year that we don't talk about it much, but we're going to be doing that in addition to polishing up the Stanley Cup, and I'll be wearing my Stanley Cup championship hat and shirt and all that stuff, and chasing Barry Trotz around and all the stuff we're going to be doing around here. But in the meantime, they're going to play baseball every day, every 6 out of every 7 days for the most part, all summer long. Luke Jones was out at the ballpark this weekend on a sort of a somnambulant Father's Day weekend where the Orioles dropped a couple of games before salvaging the Sunday game against Miami. Now they'll take on the Nationals and then go down to Atlanta to play in their new ballpark this weekend. Luke, we're going to get to Dear Orioles. We're going to write letters to Peter Angelos this week, John Angelos next week, Brady Anderson, Dan Duquette, Buck Showalter. I know Ken Rosenthal's had his go. We'll get to all of that. But in the meantime, as the week begins here and they get a little bit of rest and they start to sort of remodel this thing, and I know I put the game on Sunday and my wife's like, who the hell are these guys? And that's kind of where we are right now, is in a who the hell are these guys kind of way. I'm going to do all of this at 100,000 feet, but down here at 1,000 feet where they're landing planes every night and trying to make it through 9 innings, it is just a hideous thing to watch, isn't it?
It really is, and I mean, let's go back to the start of the weekend. The Orioles promote Corbin Joseph, who is the younger brother of Caleb, kind of a career minor leaguer. He's been with some other organizations, was hitting the ball really well at AA Bowie, and that's well and good. He starts at first base over Chris Davis, and it's a managerial decision, and it just speaks volumes to where this team has been from 2.5 years ago when they gave Chris Davis his contract, where they were even a year ago when, okay, he had a bad second half of the season, but you were still not thinking in terms of this guy not being a major league player anymore, and yet he hasn't played over the last week. He has been benched. They're not using the B word, but he's been benched, and Buck Showalter even came out and said that they're working with him on altering his approach. He's been taking early batting practice. He's been working with Scott Coolball. My understanding is Brady Anderson's been working with him.
Imagine that.
And they're trying to fix this, and they need to fix this. And we've said for a while now, other than just trotting them out there every day or just saying, release them and you're going to eat 9 figures still on what you owe this guy over the next 4+ years, you need to start being more aggressive in how you handle him. And at the very least, it's good to see something in that direction. Now, is he going to come back and be fixed? I'm guessing probably not. But at the very least, it's a signal of a recognition that this isn't a slump. This isn't a bad stretch. This isn't, Trey Mancini's having a rough year. Jonathan Scope's having a poor year. This has been so historically bad that there's at least some recognition publicly now that he's not just being trotted out there every day, hitting in the 5th or 6th spot and going 0 for 4 and striking out twice, and going to continue to just hit 150, and they're just going to shrug their shoulders.
Well, it's the first thing the organization has done, other than shaking up the lineup and throwing Chris Tillman out. Like, literally, there's been nothing that's been done about the worst start in the history of the franchise, in the history of most franchises, quite frankly.
Right.
I don't know that'll ever happen again in Major League Baseball, that a team's going to start 19-50 and nothing's going to be done other than benching their superstar or whatever he is. I want to go as far as
highest paid player. Let's go with that.
Fair enough, yes.
But and again, I'm not praising the Orioles by saying this. I'm just saying at least there is a signal of recognition. And look, behind the scenes, has there been things going on? Sure. But they've been very, up until this past weekend, we're very hesitant to talk in those terms. We've seen Davis get a day or two off in a row to kind of reset at a couple times, but this is the most drastic measure that we've seen that's been publicly known to do, and it's a step. I don't know if it's a step in the right direction. It's a step, And again, to the point that you just made, everything has been such the status quo, other than a couple moves here and there. You know, Caleb Joseph was sent down. Eventually, Austin Wynns came up. They just sent Chance Sisco down, and Buck alluded to him being under the weather this weekend, but he's also been struggling at the plate. He's been struggling throwing out runners. But overall, moves that have been made have been inconsequential, have been more on the day-to-day, not really looking like some kind of drastic big picture move. No firings, anything like that. We've talked about that. We'll continue to talk about that. But to start the weekend, and they lost 2 out of 3. They played a good game on Sunday, but lots of bad baseball that we've been seeing here recently, and that's stating the obvious. But to see Davis now sit for an extended period of time, and Buck Showalter even went as far to say, no, I don't think it's going to be a long-term thing, but he also added that there's no closed end to it. So it shows that they're not just giving him extra batting practice, and they're not just working with him on the side and before games and whenever else they might work with him. They're also acknowledging that they need to see some progress. They need to see some alterations. They need to see him make some adjustments that, at least in a practice setting, they start feeling good enough about to send him out there and see how he does. So, again, it's a start of something, and I hesitate to say it's a step in the right direction because we have no idea, but it's at least, it sure beats just trotting him out there every day and just saying, well, Chris has a track record. Chris has a track record. Well, you know what? He has a track record now over the last calendar year of being the worst hitter in baseball among everyday players. So,
by a wide margin, too.
Sure.
Yes,
so, we're not just talking first baseman. We're not just we're talking everyday players. Other than maybe some bench guys here and there around the league.
Well, no other player, they would not let a player be that bad.
Sure. I mean, we know the circumstances here, and these are circumstances that are it's historic. I mean, we talked so long about comparing Davis to potentially the Ryan Howard deal in Philadelphia. The Orioles would sign up in blood for what Ryan Howard did his last couple of years, as albeit still a bad player with the Phillies his last couple of years. So it is really unprecedented, but it's at least good to see them make some shift here, and we'll see where this thing goes in the coming days and weeks. I think we all, no one's naive enough to think that they're going to move on from him at this point in time, but it at least shows that they're not just going to play him every day, no questions asked.
Luke Jones is our guest. Baltimore Luke and Luke at WNST.net. All of our WNST programming brought to you by our friends at Royal Farms. Real fresh, real fast. Make sure you're getting in there for the ROFO rewards cards. I ran into Justin Tucker over at Ravens practice last week. He cut some new commercials about the fried chicken and the coffee, and I'm sure he's singing and all that stuff. I'm just singing the praises of Royal Farms and the fried chicken and the Western fries that were open very late for me over off Nursery Road. So big shout out to those folks who fed me last week when I came back from Merriweather Post after the Robert Plant show. Also brought to you by our friends over Costas Inn. I'm going to be over there giving away Free the Birds. I don't have any hats. I have a lot of shirts. We're going to be giving away Free the Birds shirts on Thursday night. We'll meet you at Costas Inn. The NBA draft begins that evening. The Orioles will be in the third game of the set with the Washington Nationals down at Nationals Park. Look, we got the All-Star game coming up in a couple of weeks. That's going to be down in Washington. I know my wife's looking forward to going down there and being a part of that and the convention and the fan fest and all that. I've started this sort of Google map where everything's going to be now that I did the parade down there last week with the Capitals. But certainly the in and out thing for Washington, for me, that'll be all and enough for me. I have no interest in going to Nationals games. I'm going to an All-Star game. But over the next 3-4 weeks here, the thoughts of what's going to happen, we're going to be talking at length about all aspects of this. But in the here and now, we're going to measure again against the Nationals team in the middle of the week, going down to Atlanta. They come back home, Seattle, and then the Angels come in before the 4th of July. None of these games matter. They can let the kids in for free. They can do all that. The people that are sort of up on the baseball side of this, when you see Brooks Robinson in the dugout with Manny Machado, the get off my lawn guy says, well, there's comparing two guys that have not much in common beyond being good baseball players, because the one guy on the right's got 2 statues here. The other one's never going to have one here. And the story of Machado really I think the national media is going to start to circle this thing. And, Rosenthal's getting some clicks once a week now on what's going to happen with Buck and the bigger picture of all of this. But holding it together and not embarrassing yourself, I mean, they go days without having a lead at this point, and we can all rejoice Sunday and Bundy, and, they won a baseball game, but it does feel like this team's going to win a game or two a week here the rest of the way, that there's not going to be a 7-game winning streak over the hill anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, you say that, but we've seen, 2010 was a perfect example. This team was on a pace to essentially, potentially overtake the 88 Orioles, and they played well over the final 2 months. Now, how much of that was just Buck Showalter coming in on a white horse and turning things around, or maybe young guys finally clicking? I don't know. I don't know how you define all that. Look, this is a really bad team. I don't think we need to spend time debating that anymore. I mean, when you're 30 games under 500 through your first 70, it goes without saying. But
the story is who's getting the at-bats and who's getting the pitches, right, and who are they and what's the plan. I don't know to say that I like it or don't like it. I only like it because Chris Davis isn't a part of it right now. But to your point, if the next thing you're going to do is bring up some guy from, the Durham Bulls, I don't know. And letting Pedro Alvarez take 5 hikes a night, I don't know what the hell they're doing. I mean, and I know there have been comedic Onion video series on the web making fun of them last week, and we could sit here and go Jimmy Fallon and Colbert and piss on them all night, and I can make Jay Leno jokes, and I'm probably going to do a little bit of that routine over the next 4 weeks to make it interesting and be snarky and all that stuff. But boy, getting out of bed every day and getting on the next airplane and getting on the next bus and going out there and playing, it looks pretty lethargic from this level. It really does.
Sure. Well, you can talk about lethargic. You can talk about effort level. I mean, look, are you going to have some times where you're not focused in because you're 30 games below 500? Yeah, I think that's human nature. I think anyone who works for a company that is circling the drain financially or knows they're going out of business, some retail store that announces they're closing their doors. I think you're going to have some of that, as much as we all like to think we have the perfect work ethics. But that said, with this team, there are still a lot of guys that have a lot to play for on individual levels, and I think even from a big picture standpoint for the organization, there are individuals you point to that you want to see play well. Now, clearly, you can talk about guys like Machado, Adam Jones, Brad Brock. Zach Britton's now back on the hill and pitching, and had a really shaky 2018 debut, but has looked better since then. Pitched in the ninth inning on Sunday in their win. Those guys, clearly you want to see them, 1, stay healthy, 2, play really well between now and whenever they're moved, potentially at the trade deadline or before. But beyond that, when you go beyond that, and this is the mode I'm in now as far as covering this team on a daily basis. Whether they win or lose, that doesn't matter at this point. You can be 30 games under 500, 25, 35, whatever. They're going to play better for a couple stretches at some point in time. It doesn't mean it's going to mean anything other than, I don't think they're going to lose 117 games actually when it's all said and done. Now,
but on a night-by-night basis to figure out which nights they're going to win, I mean.
Well, but that's where you start looking at individual performances. Sunday, Dylan Bundy gives up 2 home runs to Justin Bour. Other than Justin Bour, he pitched pretty well. Now, I'm not going to apologize for him giving up 4 runs in 6 innings, and he ran out of gas in the final inning. But you're clearly interested to see what Dylan Bundy's going to do every night. And I think the good news with him is since that alarming stretch that he had after he was so good over the first 5-6 starts of the season where he gave up all those home runs. He had the historic game where he didn't get out of the first inning, didn't retire a batter, and gave up, 3 or 4 home runs. And you're wondering, is his shoulder bothering him? Does he have an injury of some sort?
I almost bet against him in Vegas on the Mets game on the afternoon because I thought they can't win 2 in a row. I would have lost the bet, by the way. But, it was at that point where you're like, well, how's he going to put a couple of good starts together? And lo and behold, he still is worth watching every 5th day. There's not a whole lot about this team worth watching, but on the night he pitches, they have a chance. I feel that way.
And that's my point. And for me, again, and I think even for many fans who are just, people that are in the wool baseball fans that are still going to tune in most nights when they don't have anything else to do, just because that's what you do as a baseball fan when you're that dedicated, even if it's you're completely disgusted by what you've seen, and rightfully so this season. But you're looking at Bundy, who has pitched better of late, since he had that 3-game stretch where he gave up by, I think it was 9 home runs over 9 total innings, and you're thinking, what in the world's going on? He's looked much more like Dylan Bundy again since then. Kevin Gausman has been inconsistent, but still someone that you're interested in seeing how he does. And on the offensive side over the weekend, even though they didn't win on Saturday, they started swinging it a little bit better. Jonathan Scope has been awful this season, and we haven't talked about it a whole lot because of Chris Davis, but we've seen him draw some more walks over the last 3 to 4 days. He hit a home run on Saturday. Those are encouraging signs, and you need to see Jonathan Scope start playing better, whether it's talking about trading him or whether it's talking about wanting to invest a long-term contract in him at some point over the next calendar year.
Boy, I can't think of a player where the temperature has changed as quickly, and I've been at this a long time. I mean, I've seen some Craig Worthingtons, right, where from 1 year it goes away. I mean, I would even say to some degree Wieters, the fact that at one point that they would have spent some money on him and they never really did. The Jeffrey Hammonds types that had all of this potential over all those years. But, I was pretty convinced Scope was the real thing. And
here's the thing with that, though. I mean, Jonathan Scope had been a productive player prior to last year. Now, 2014, he was on this roster exclusively because of his defense. I mean, he had a 600 OPS, but he played really good defense at second base, and they had a good enough lineup around him that you could endure having someone with a lesser bat. I mean, the Orioles did it for years with Mark Belanger at shortstop, so it shows you can do that. But he had improved offensively, and then last year he exploded, and he had what at this point you're starting to look like, okay, maybe that wasn't the start of an ascension, maybe that was his career year. But that said, what Scope has done offensively this year, he was way better than that in 2015, and he was way better than that in 2016. So you want to see him get straightened out. Doesn't mean he's going to get back to where he was last year, where he hit for more power and hit more consistently and drew more walks and was a much more patient hitter than he's ever shown at the major league level. But he's one of those pivot point players. It's easy to talk about trading Machado and Jones and Britton and Brock because they're going to be free agents. There's no intelligence in saying whether you should trade those guys or not at this point. Where you really need to start debating is the next steps as an organization. And clearly we know whoever's going to be making the decisions, that hasn't been determined yet, or at least we don't know how that's going to look. But you still need to make decisions on guys like or guys like Jonathan Scope, and then Kevin Gausman is going to be a free agent the year after that. And you need to decide, do you think you're going to be back in a position to win again before Dylan Bundy hits free agency? And if you don't think that, you need to be having a conversation about him at some point over the next year and a half probably. So, those are the guys you need to be looking at, and you want to see them play well. Does it make, is it going to move the meter in terms of this team being historically awful instead of just awful? I mean, maybe. I'm not really interested in that, though. I want to see young guys play well. I want to see more of what Tanner Scott did on Sunday, where he comes in with the bases loaded, and Justin Bour, who's hit 2 home runs to that point in the game, is suddenly the tying run in an 8-4 game, and he strikes him out on a beautiful slider. You want to see those types of things because those are the kind of guys that, at least from a contractual standpoint, are going to be here for the next several years, and that's where you want to see improvement. Now, to the point you made about who's playing in the everyday lineup and do you want to be giving the bats to guys like Jace Peterson or Pedro Alvarez? I hear all that. At the same time, I'm not sure a better strategy is to just call up any prospects you have.
But when a guy's really hitting $180, dude, and I know we had higher hopes for the Joey Rickards and the guys that were the dumpster dive guys, all the sort of quad A guys that you want to believe in. Who was that guy they brought in from the Pirates? 5 years
ago. Travis Snyder.
Oh, right. I mean, we keep going through all of these kind of disposable cats. the Gentrys and all these guys. At some point, if you can't hit 250 or have if I'm holding on to you're hitting a $180 and you're 30-something and you can't hold the glove, and our hope is that maybe you hit one home run tonight. If we put you in there every 3 nights, you'll hit one. It's bizarre to me. It really is. But the whole thing just speaks of a lack of pride organizationally to have a strategy to say, this isn't good enough, trotting out these 194 guys that might hit 23 home runs if we give them 500. I mean, it's kind of an outrage, but I don't know what to be outraged about because I don't even know where to start because it's such a dumpster fire. Other than trading Machado and what you're going to get, I don't know that any of this stuff matters, really.
Well, but the point is, you still have to play the game.
I know.
And you still have to fill out a 25-man roster. And just because you don't want to see Craig Gentry in the outfield, to me, doesn't mean that you call up someone from Double-A if you don't feel that they're ready to contribute at the major league level, because you're just feeding into the same deal. And then what do you have then? You have Anthony Santander playing right field, which we saw for the first month and a half of the season. A guy that is a maybe, a guy that I think could one day develop into something, but he's not ready yet.
Or Nestor Cortez coming in and pitching in key situations at Fenway Park in the first month of the season with the game on the line.
But my point is, I am not saying that playing those guys that have no future and are either has-beens or never was types, I'm not saying that's a good strategy. You're preaching to the choir on that. My point of contention is, I don't think that means you just bring up any minor leaguer that you think might be good if you think they can still benefit from playing in the minor leagues a little bit longer. Cedric Mullins, who just got promoted 2 weeks ago from Double-A Bowie, and Mullins has been someone that's been on the radar. He's considered kind of a fringe top 100 prospect in baseball. Not a sure thing by any stretch of the imagination, but he has some tools that people like. Well, he's in Triple-A right now, and he entered Sunday hitting 200 to this point. That's not to say that he's not going to be a major league player. That's not to say he can't be a good major league player. But my point is, just because you hate what you're seeing at the major league level, I don't think that necessarily justifies just bringing up any prospect unless it's someone that you feel is ready to go. Now, Cedric Mullins might be this team's everyday center fielder if they trade Adam Jones at some point between now and the trade deadline.
Well, this is where you are when your team stinks, is trying to figure out when and where to plug guys in and not get them in over their heads either. But
but my point is, you have to be really careful to not make just decisions that are still not good decisions, but you're just doing it because you're ticked off and you're trying to send a message. Cedric Mullins, I want to see him in Baltimore, absolutely, but I want it to be when you feel that the time's right that he's going to play well. And for everyone that's Manny Machado or a Michael Givens who went right from Double-A to the majors, for every guy like that, there are a slew of guys that you'll find that aren't going to be ready, and even guys that you're going to find that are still going to be good major league players one day, but you don't want to be. Two wrongs don't make a right, is my point. You don't want to get rid of some guy that has no future, and just because you're going to call up someone who's not ready. That's the point I'm making here. And the larger point here that we haven't really touched on is this team does have some talent, some intriguing players in the minor leagues. It's not enough. I get that. They need more. There's no question, and you hope that they're able to do that with some of these potential trades they're going to make in the coming weeks. But a lot of those players we talk about are guys that are not at Triple-A, guys that are not on the cusp of being major league players. I want to see Cedric Mullins. I want to see Ryan Mountcastle. I want to see Austin Hayes get healthy again and look like the hitter he was last year, where he was looking like a blue-chip type guy, but he struggled this year, and he's had some injuries this year. It doesn't always happen overnight in that regard, and that's what's really frustrating, and that's what's so alarming about the short-term future of this organization, because you don't have 2 or 3 Jonathan Scope types that you're ready to call up immediately and come up and be successful. They have a guy at Frederick right now, Ryan McKenna, who, go look up his numbers. He has been one of the great success stories of the organization this year, but he's at Single-A. Do you really want to push that and risk pushing him too soon? And that's not to say he's going to be an all-star, but he looks like a guy that has a chance to be an everyday major league player one day. But I'm not sure it's what's best for him or the organization to just say, because you're tired of seeing Craig Gentry out there and he has no future with this team whatsoever, that you get rid of him and just promote someone from single or double A. The problem is they don't have enough legitimate, at least fringe prospect types at triple A right now. It's much more of the quad A, career minor league type guys.
More Pedro Alvarez's and Colby Rasmussen's.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. You can call up, you can... Look, I'm not going to argue against getting rid of some of the names we mentioned.
Well, every time Mike Wright takes the ball, that's who we're talking about.
Right. I mean, there are, and this is where I kind of laugh, because you're still seeing people opine about, okay, they need to make a roster move. We were talking about this a few days ago when Zach Britton was activated from the DL, and there was some debate as far as, okay, who's going to go. I could probably give you 7 or 8, maybe 9, maybe 10 guys on the current 25-man roster where you could jettison them and you'd get a shoulder shrug from me and just be like, oh, okay. So, but the problem is you can't just get rid of those guys. You got to have a 25-man roster. You got to play every night. As much as a lot of people out there would probably just assume fast forward to 2019 and kind of see where this team looks like at the beginning of next year, you got to play out the schedule. And again, I don't think you want to compound having dead weight on the roster and getting rid of that with bringing up minor league players who actually have a future in your mind, bringing them up too soon. So, this is where you're kind of in this holding pattern where, yeah, you're not going to win many games, and yeah, it's not going to be all that compelling. That's stating the obvious, but at the same time, pay attention to what's happening at Norfolk with Cedric Mullins now. Pay attention to what's happening at Bowie and Frederick and Delmarva, where you get down to single A, and there are some. Yeah,
because whoever is running the organization, this is what they're inheriting, right? Or if they're going to let Brady Anderson run around and run the place, this is it. I mean, there is no other there. There's maybe there will be if they deal all 3 or 4 of these pieces. Well, and I know one of the real concerns here is one of these guys getting hurt, quite frankly. I mean, we've already had that with Britton. I mean, Machado pulls a hammy here, and there goes the farm, right?
Yeah, and there was even a slide into second base. I can't recall who made the slide, but Machado was kind of reaching for a bad, it wasn't the best throw, and it looked like his leg twisted just ever so slightly. I think he was fine. I'm not trying to be an alarmist, but it was a reminder of what can happen. Now, that said, in the same way that you can't just put football players in bubble wrap in the off season and OTAs and all of that, guys got to go out and play, and you don't want to do anything reckless. And I think we've seen on a number of occasions, because they've been in this position a lot, where the Orioles have been down 8 or 9 runs late in the game. We've seen Adam Jones and Manny Machado come out of the game, but it does speak to the point of why you shouldn't just be waiting until the deadline. That's why you should be as proactive as you can be in trying to make a move, and trying to gauge the market and trying to gauge urgency, trying to gauge when teams are going to make their best offer. That's a challenging thing. And even the best GMs, it's not an exact science. There's not some formula that says this date is the absolute best date to make a trade, but at the same time, you need to be looking for a deal that's right. And if you get a deal, you get a trade offer that's right, at this point in time, there's no reason whatsoever to avoid pulling the trigger. And we'll see how that plays out in terms of whether they deal Machado at the end of June or the second week of July, or do they wait until the final 3 or 4 days, and then you're at the mercy of which teams are willing to play ball with you.
All right, well, I'm going to take a TO here because the Dear Orioles series is beginning, and there's a billion things we could talk about on the trade side and where they're going to go, but I'm going to be writing about the owner, about the management, about the manager, about the players, about the broadcasters, about the media, about the fans, about the business partners over the coming 6 weeks as we get ready for all this. Luke will be covering the day-to-day, as they say, and the Ravens gone bye-bye here for a couple of weeks, so I'm going to shine the Stanley Cup. We're going to do a lot of Stanley Cup talks and remembrances and all that. I might sneak this much World Cup in as well, just a little bit, on our YouTube WNSTV channel as well as our Facebook Live channel, but a lot of Orioles, a lot of Dear Orioles, a lot of open, frank conversations in regard to where the Orioles are and what to do to fix them. So you'll find out how we're different than the flagship around here over the next 5 or 6 weeks. Luke at WNST.net reaches him. Baltimore Luke also finds him on Twitter. I am me on Twitter, as well as Nasty at WNST.net in the real world. Of course, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live on our Facebook, as well as all the time out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault. That's 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. Download, listen when you want, where you want, how you want, to what you want, podcast it like the kids are doing and the millennials. Get off my lawn. It's all in the buyatoyota.com audio vault, so you can find it there. The morning newspaper ships digitally to your email inbox each and every morning at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness at planetfitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life, guaranteed, as well as the Maryland Jockey Club, bringing you the Laurel entries for the weekend. We are racing each and every weekend, getting ready for the Maryland Million later on in the summer. We have a Triple Crown winner now in Justify, and all of the entries in our morning newspaper, as well as on the front of WNST.net. Dennis is here on Thursday, driving you home from 3 until 5. It is the SSV on WNST. And Coonsford sponsoring our WNST text service. That is our breaking news service when the Orioles deal Manny Machado. You'll get it first. It's all brought to you by Coonsford. Dennis is here 3 until 5 with the SSV on WNST. I will join him. We will fix the Orioles all week long. It's our Dear Orioles series and month ahead. It's going to be fun, educational, informative, alarming, disgusting, deplorable, all the above. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.